Hey everyone, this is Brad Hughes, School Principal and Chief Encouragement Officer from Ontario, Canada. And I've got some good news for you. You found the Good News Brad News podcast, amplifying stories of heart-led educators moving from positive intention to action. Great people like you, improving kids' lives through service, connection, and finding the fun. So glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back. So glad you're joining me for episode 13 of the Good News Brad News podcast. I am your host, Brad Hughes, and as you settle in and get comfortable, you're likely aware that 13 is an unlucky number for many, and that some buildings even forego a 13th floor. Did I suffer a case of triskaidekaphobia and consider skipping a 13th episode of Good News Brad News? Not a chance, because I truly lucked out with my 13th guest, Janice Moyer. And after listening today, you'll be floored by her humor, candor, and commitment to kids. Now, Jan is a partner and a parent of 4, a member of a large extended family, a devoted teacher and colleague, a blogger, a neighbor and friend, and a curator of life's lighter moments who also reveals the poignancy and fellowship within them. Now, Jen and I discuss a number of things near and dear to both of us, including how relationships sustain, protect, and restore us during challenging times. The importance of delving curiously past surface behaviors to reveal underlying stresses and unmet needs. And how vulnerability strengthens bonds with others and deepens understanding of ourselves. The power and paradox of vulnerability. When we open ourselves to disclosing our inner thoughts and feelings, we risk injury and harm, looking or feeling foolish, weak, wrong, or incomplete. Yet in vulnerability, there is the potential to find strength and courage and authentic connection when we allow others to know us as complete and imperfect human beings. If anything, those imperfections, insecurities, doubts, and fears, and the pain we may endure because of them, are things we all experience. That's right. The things that make us feel most apart, most alone, are also the things we have in common with everyone else. Brené Brown writes, "Vulnerability is the core of shame and fear and our struggle for worthiness. But it appears that it's also the birthplace of joy, of creativity, of belonging, of love. We cultivate love when we allow ourselves to be deeply seen and known." As you'll hear, Jan strives to cultivate loving spaces where students are seen, known, and supported. And it really shows. I know you'll enjoy getting to know Jan today, and after hearing her story, you'll be eager to connect with her too. So, here's my interview with Janice Moyer today on the Good News Brad News podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Good News Brad News podcast. I am so excited to be chatting with Jan Moyer. Jan, welcome to the Good News Brad News podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
As we get started, I always like to ask our guests to talk about their different roles, your family roles, your professional roles, your roles in the community. So what does the world need to know about Jan Moyer?
Well, I have been married to my husband for, I think, close to 20 years now, and he's an educator as well. I have 4 boys. They range from 15 down to 9. I'm a daughter and a sister. I'm an aunt and a sister-in-law. I have quite a big extended family, which has been really neat. I am a teacher for almost 20 years as well. Let me think. I'm a volunteer. I'm a friend. I'm a neighbor. I really like my neighbors and my community. So I think that's me in a nutshell.
So it sounds like in all different aspects of your life, in all of your different roles, the common thread that I'm hearing is relationships. And I know that you value relationships and you put that value forward as an educator as well. Tell me about what's important to you about creating and growing a classroom community.
When you have a classroom community, you're building relationships that matter to kids, regardless of their background. What if they've had positive or negative relationships? When kids feel like they belong and are connected, you can reach them differently than school's a chore or it's just an obligation I have to go to. I think it's really, really key. I see it more and more the longer I'm teaching, how important that is. For me to be able to know what makes a student tick, what makes them them. I often think about like behavior is communication. So the only way I'm going to get down to that level is by knowing them. And the only way they're going to really let me know them is by feeling safe and that they're part of this relationship. So right from the start, we take it pretty nice and easy, get to know each other as we build that relationship. A few years back, we did a book study at my school about the pathways that are critical for life. And one of them is investing in people's emotional piggy banks. And so I really took that to heart. And so I look at the fall or when a child joins our classroom as that time to really invest in them, because at some point you're going to need to withdraw with either some redirection, a little bit of criticism, or having some hard conversations. And you can't do that if you haven't earned that spot in their circle. And if they don't value that, then it doesn't happen. It's just not positive. So I love seeing how the kids connect with each other. And I use that over and over, especially now with COVID. We really talked about why it's important to follow all the safety protocols. And it's because you're family and you care about the kids in this class and you care about the staff. And so those things are important because you're part of that community. So just doing those sort of things, having some fun together, that's how it starts. And then we build on that as the year goes on.
Jen, what does it mean to you to be able to crack a student's code? And how does that code help you to hang in with kids who are experiencing difficulty?
It's a kind of a neat challenge. I look at it almost like a mystery when I see kids. And, you hear through the teacher grapevine, like so-and-so can be difficult in this situation, or this one has this habit or whatever. And so that's great information. But when I meet them, I try to have a fairly clean slate and a new lens. And I like to look at what they're doing, but then think about why. Like, what does it serve? What purpose does it serve? What's the payoff? And so often misbehavior, it is just communication. It's saying, I don't feel seen, or I'm frustrated, or I'm scared to take a chance. I don't want to risk this. I'm afraid of getting into trouble. Sometimes I've actually written it down and checked, when are these behaviors happening? Sometimes it's just an observation or speaking to other teachers, like, when did you notice this behavior was coming out? Does it happen in your class? And, for instance, I had a student who, you normally would just chalk it up to, they just want attention. And once I thought it over a lot, really looked at when it's happening, why, I realized it's not that. They want it to be seen. They want it to be known. And when I saw that, it changed how I reacted. Finding the mystery behind it is satisfying because you see how you can build success for those kids and how they find their place and they feel seen in her, because ultimately that's what we all want, is to be known and seen for who we are.
It sounds like you draw a lot of inspiration and support from your family back into the classroom. How would you say the Moyer family is reflected in what happens within your classroom, and what about your classroom do you take back home to the family?
Once I became a parent, it did change a little bit of my lens in that I really started to see the students as they are people. They are someone's special person. They belong in another life that I am not part of. And so that helped a lot, just to see that kids have different aspects of their life. I try to make it really clear to my students that there's nothing they can do that would stop me from loving them as a teacher. Nothing that I would not care for them. And we might have a tough day and you might mess up, but that doesn't define you. Much like I would say to my boys, I want to be the one you come to when you mess up, not the one that you're afraid of. That has been really, really powerful, to be able to have that conversation, which happens every year. there's at least one student that specifically needs to hear that, but then it's a culture in the room. And so there's a lot more ownership for those mistakes and misbehaviors. On the flip side, I will also love you enough to hold you to a high standard of behavior, and I will hold you to doing your best at school. And it might not be today, and maybe it was a bad day, but that's coming. And we're going to have hard conversations because I care. When I come home, realizing, okay, so my boys have been at school holding it all together, trying their best. They need to have a safe place at home where they can be little turkeys and unwind. And it's a very different role. Mrs. Moyer is quite different than Jan Moyer sometimes. Jan Moyer is a big softie compared sometimes to Mrs. Moyer. I think it helps with perspective. And I think it helps my boys sometimes decode their teacher's behavior, that they have educator parents. We help them learn not to sweat this. Don't worry about that. We can sort of help navigate that. And I think that's been really great to have those two worlds kind of mesh together.
Welcoming kids back to school face-to-face in September 2020. Schools have been closed for 6 months. Roll out the red carpet, get the birthday party started, put up the circus tent. But you welcomed kids back with intentionality that they were entering a boring classroom. Tell me about that.
So what I told the kids on the first day was 2020 has been exciting enough. We have had a pandemic. We have had a lockdown, killer bees, fires, celebrity deaths. And I mean, they came up with more things that I'd even forgotten because 2020 was just such a blur. So I said, you know what? We don't need any more excitement. Why don't we just focus on those everyday things that we're grateful for, that, we're so happy we can still do, and that kind of thing. And I sort of left it at that to see where it would go. And oh my goodness, they took off with it. I'm really lucky I have such a great crew that really hooked into that. We would identify the most boring thing of the day, and it would be things like, I ate my lunch, and that sort of thing. So it became our thing. And I really value inside jokes and inside themes within each class. And the kids now, they're like, oh, everyone thinks our room is really boring because of the sign on the door, but we all know we're anything but. They said, this is the best collection of weirdos in the school. And I love that they love their own uniqueness. It's just really, really neat. And I think it really helped them have that lens on what matters. And for me too, and to see what matters to them. We really value in our classroom just being a chill room. So lots of fun things happen, but and I love it, they use some of the language that we've talked about. So they say, no, we don't match the energy that's outside or in the hall or whatever's happening. We're going to set our own. And hearing those things echoed back to me that we've worked on is fantastic. So that's our boring theme.
As you find yourself in conversations with kids about your capacity, and when you find yourself in situations where you have already expended a lot of energy, how are you intentional about taking time to restore that lost energy? What fills your bucket back up?
When our capacity is getting to its limit, what upsets us and what spills out isn't always the thing that was the problem. If I'm in a healthy place and just a little tired, a little bit run down, then I find helping others can build more capacity. And so that's a great place to be. And then, you feel like you're helping, you're, lifting someone else's burden, or just being a good sounding board for somebody who might just want to have you listen, or maybe advice. So in those situations, like, I'm all in, and it definitely fills my cup, makes me feel great. If I'm in a slightly unhealthy, just too much is going on, then my tendency is to turtle. And so as I've learned that about myself, I realize that's when I need to have a really good conversation with someone that I trust. And I typically don't like to be vulnerable that much. Like, I'm fine admitting my mistakes and I'm having a bad day and I was wrong, but to really get emotional is not something I'm very comfortable with. And I'm learning that that's good for me, but also for my friends to see, I'm not Teflon. Things don't always just slide off. So for me, it's going for a long walk with one of my best friends, just talking it out, going for a walk with my husband, Dean. Sometimes it's just that coffee on the porch, or going out for breakfast when we were able to do all those sorts of things in a smaller setting. That's for me what I do. I find being alone helps me recharge when, again, if I'm in a fairly good spot. That's just that a bit of alone time is a good way for me. My faith is important. So spending time with somebody who really is walking that same path with me, and we can talk it out and be honest, and then know like they're praying for me, or you can just share that. It's just different. So yeah, I've learned as I'm getting older that it's good to be vulnerable and go to the people that know you well. And it's important to foster those relationships that know you well. And it's part of my job in the friendship is to be honest and say, I'm failing right now. Or sometimes just saying no to things and spending more time like with the boys and investing that way, just taking a real break from stuff.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Tough Bananas blog. Your blog is hilarious. It's also poignant. And I'd like to know more about how Tough Bananas got started and what keeps you going.
I was home on my 4th mat leave, and a lot of my friends had already returned to work, and I was kind of lonely. A friend said to me, you should get on Twitter. You know, that'd be fun for you, some of your one-liners and stuff. So I did, and then you start to make some of those relationships and connections. One of my, Twitter friends messaged me and said, do you blog? And really, I'm not asking, I'm telling you that you should. I'm not a mommy blogger, like, don't follow me for tips or anything like that. But I started I think at first it was just like things I found ridiculous, really silly things the boys did. I would write about it, and it was really good for me. And it made me feel connected because people would relate and say, oh my goodness, my kids did the same thing. Or, I met friends through this, and it was really neat. Like, I still have relationships with those people I met and made friends with 9-10 years ago. And it really helped me focus on the temporary. So when you're potty training and you find unpleasant surprises, that's just now. And ha ha ha. Like, it really helped me have a better lens on it rather than feeling bogged down as the mom of 4 small kids. And that's how it all started. And I remember when I was trying to figure out a name for it, I wasn't sure because I didn't want to put myself in a box. So my mom used to say all the time, well, just Tough Bananas. You're like, oh, we're having that for dinner. Yep. Tough Bananas. Or, and it was it wasn't in her not being sympathetic. It was, well, moving on, just, I don't have time for your nonsense. And this isn't something that we're going to spend time on and sweat and stress about. So I thought, well, that actually, yeah, that would work. And so that's where the name came from. Yeah, it's evolved over time. I used to blog more frequently when I was home more. And again, it was like kind of that string for sanity for me, just that lifeline when I was home a lot. And I liked being home, but it was different with the younger ones. Then going back to work, I think things changed a bit. Like I started to look at things a little bit differently, and so the content changed a bit. But yeah, like my family is ridiculous. They are. Like, I'm married to someone who's also ridiculous. And I have no problem poking fun at myself. I often say I have like 20 tabs open, literally and figuratively. Like, my brain is all over the place. We once spent an entire afternoon dismantling the couch, looking for the small clicker that we couldn't find. And we were sure one of the boys had lost. And then I quietly discovered it on the kitchen counter behind the salt and pepper. So just being able to not take life too seriously. And then, yeah, I find the ones that resonate with others are the ones that I cry when I write. So if I'm feeling the emotion when I write it, then I know it's going to hit home with others. And I appreciate when those posts speak to other people, because it again builds that relationship with people I know, but also people I don't know very well. Or just knowing like I was able to put something into words that they were feeling. That's really satisfying. That's why I do it. It truly helps me process. So some of those harder moments, I don't write about it then, but maybe later. And that's when I feel the release of that grief or that sadness or whatever I might have been feeling at the time.
It sounds like for you, content creation is part of a cycle of allowing others to know you better. And then in the responses to what you write, you're allowing others to get to know you better, but you're also knowing yourself better in the process, where what you created actually caused you to reflect or to know yourself in a way that you hadn't expected.
I didn't really think of myself as a nostalgic person. And yet I see a theme sometimes through like, this reminds me of this person. And this made me think of that event. So I am more nostalgic than I think. I'm an overly emotional person. Like I don't, I'm not a robot or anything, but I think it allows me to share and be vulnerable. And like I said before, as I'm growing and allowing myself to be vulnerable, I think that was a start for me to do it on, like, again, I don't enjoy crying. I don't enjoy feeling that way with others. And so when I can process it that way in writing, I get to control it a bit, but then it also makes me self-reflect. Absolutely. I've learned things about myself throughout the whole thing. I have learned that I need time to process. That's who I am. Like, I'm not always ready to name a feeling in the moment. I sometimes need to really let that marinate. And that's how most of my posts come about, is I think about them for a long time and formulate them in my head before I even open up the tab to start typing. I've already had a lot of thoughts mulling around. So that's, for me, it's been the process itself has been really enlightening.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you think the world is going to hear the Tough Bananas podcast anytime in the future?
That's not on my horizon. I'm happy to be a guest. I don't see myself going in that direction, but I mean, who knows, right? For now, I'm happy with my social media and teaching. That's what I really like doing.
Jen, regardless, I know that listeners are going to be eager to connect with you and find out what is Tough Bananas all about. What are some of the best ways to keep in touch with Jan Moyer?
I'm on most of the socials. So I have a Tough Bananas Facebook page. I interact the most probably Twitter and Instagram, and I do still blog, not nearly as regularly as before, but you can find me there as well. And so, yeah, I would say Twitter, Instagram, those are my two favorites.
Jen, I'll make sure that all your contact information is in our show notes so that listeners can find you, follow you, learn along with you. Jan Moyer, thank you so much for a tremendous conversation tonight.
Lovely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Good News, Brad News podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment wherever you found this podcast. And if you like what you heard, please recommend Good News, Brad News to a friend. And please hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at Brad, BRAD, _Hughes, HUGHES. I look forward to hearing from you and to reconnecting with you on our next episode. Until then, get out there and do amazing things.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.